Hi, I'm Mark Owen from Moose Marketing PR, the editor of Punchline magazine, and welcome to Punchline Talks, the business breakfast briefers, where each week I invite a panel of experts to review the morning newspapers, find out what's going on in their business sector and their own individual businesses, and finally, what's caught their eye in this week's Punchline. But before I introduce the guys, I'd just like to say a big and amazing thank you to Evans Jones, who are our sponsors over the last 4 weeks, and we couldn't run the show without them. Thanks ever so much. And it just so happens the MD here is him personally I can thank. So thanks ever so much, David, for doing that. Really, really appreciate it. So let's get on with the show. I'd like to introduce today's experts. We've got David Jones, Managing Director, Property and Planning Experts, Evans Jones. We've got Nigel Tillott, Director of Davies and Partners. He's also a keen marathon runner and the organizer, congratulations, by the way, of the 10K run, Gloucester's 10K. We've got Margaret Adewale from Human Resources Director of HR Department. And you launched your business, Margaret. Congratulations in the midst of a pandemic. Not many people can say that, and successfully too. And finally, we've got Martin Hughes, CEO of Lilian Faithfull Homes, who's got 5 care homes, 2 day centres, 450 staff. Celebrated 75 years in business this year as well. Congratulations there. Martin, so welcome all of you to the show. Let's kick off straight away with the newspapers. I've been down to the local shop, saw my mate Francis. The Times, vaccinated Britons rush to book quarantine holidays. The Daily Telegraph, Sunak tells workers to get back in the office. Sending these on to the Red Tops. Fever pitch, it's all about England. We've got the Daily Mail, thousands are spared, isolation madness. The Guardian, easing of quarantine rules opens the summer travel to 100 countries. The Sun is my favourite headline of the day. 3 lie-ins. Oh, I thought it was quite clever, but there you go. The Western Daily Press, well, they've gone on a local charity story where somebody is being accused of basically stealing £57,000 from the foundation of his brother's charity. That's the lead story in the Daily Western Daily Press. And finally, our local Citizen, have your say on how a new hospital will look. Right, let's get on with our show. So I'll bring Martin in straight away. Martin, thanks for joining us. What have you picked out today's papers, please, sir?
That's an interesting one. It's from The Guardian. You have a look around here. And there's a big story in the business section of The Guardian, which resonates with the care sector. Private equity firms are targeting a lot of British companies at the moment. You'll see them looking at Morrison's or an Asda. What interests me in that, whilst it's good for the economy that people are invested in British businesses, what worries me is that model has never worked in care. Whenever somebody from private equity has looked at the care sector, you're not there to make money. And there's some catastrophic failures in the care sector when private equity gets involved, because you just can't run care homes for profit and expect it to work. And you've had Southern Cross, HC1, who are disposing of 50 homes in the UK. So that although private equity is a good thing for many businesses, it just doesn't work in the care sector. And I hope that that comes through and it gets resolved in the next couple of months with a funding model.
It's a bit like Morrison's, isn't it? Morrison's is under attack for the same type of thing, isn't it? Where there are sort of big companies floating around it, the sharks. Morrison's have a big land bank. Let's be honest, that's what these guys are interested in. It's a bit
or
like,
sale and lease back of the stores.
Exactly. They'll gear them up, load them up with a tremendous amount of debt, and then grind the companies down, and then before you know it. Anyway, it doesn't. You are right. It never works out good. I mean, goodness gracious, at this particular moment in the care home sector, it must be hard enough as it is.
It is, and particularly with this private equity model. Yes, it's a big London story, but actually this is happening in Cheltenham. There are a number of care homes in Cheltenham and Gloucestershire that have been snapped up by private equity houses. There's some in Cirencester. There's one in Cheltenham that's owned by a real estate investment trust, or they call them a REIT. And they buy the building, lease it back to the operator, and it really puts the wrong type of pressure on the care home and the care home management to drive profitability to pay the rent, as opposed to driving profitability to deliver better care. So I'm not in favour of the private equity model in the care sector.
No, I can see that. Quite passionate. Perhaps we can have another chat about this as well. Martin, have you got anything else for us there? Is there anything else you picked out?
Yes, my other story is on the front page of the Times, which is this way. If England win, we're going to get a day off, which for all of us, I think would be a really, really good thing. We could all do with another day off, and that's something I'd be massively in favour of at the moment.
Well, that's brilliant. Thanks very much there, Martin. I will move over to David. I actually don't agree that we can just give every owner can give everybody a day off, but then maybe that's just me. David, do you think everyone should have a day off?
Yes. Yeah, why not?
Good. Give all your staff a day off.
Oh, that's committing me, isn't it? Of course I will. Of course I will. You heard it here first, Mark.
Okay. Anyway, what have you picked out in the newspapers, please, sir?
It'll probably come as no surprise that I've got a few stories about the high street. So obviously you highlighted Sunak telling workers to get back to the office in the Telegraph. I think, which is part of the regeneration of the high street, getting footfall back. But I think more so, there's an interesting article in the Eye from Sir Tim Smith of the Eden Project, who says that city centres need to be more like villages, which is something I completely agree with. I think we need to, and in London, you do see this already. You've got, little centres in London which do feel very villagey and have their own identity and draw people in because of that. But we need to try and replicate that within our city centres. So reducing car usage, greening cities. Changing the rating structure, so it's based on sales rather than property. So all of that, I think is good, and something that I've been certainly, advocating over the last 4 or 5 years, really. I suppose to on the flip side of that, also in the Telegraph, still reports of footfall within the high street still being significantly down, so 27% or so down on June 2019 figures. So we still have a long way to go, but there are some good signs, and I think you've got some good signs in Punchline as well. With the opening of the sort of boutique cinema. I think there was a boat being refurbished in Gloucester Docks for a restaurant.
That's right.
And Phil Vickery's number 3. So there's people are being brave, and are investing in high street and high street related activities. As I've said many times, it's not about retail, it's about people and bringing people into centres. And I think Sir Tim Smith has echoed that in his article in the Eye, very much so.
Okay, thanks very much there, David. Thanks so much. Margaret, what have you picked out for us, please?
I picked up in the Times this morning. It's on my phone because I've got my Times on. Oh, you can't see it really. But anyway, fifth of adults under 35 say they've only one or no close friends. And what they're basically saying is we're in the grip of a nation of loneliness, particularly amongst the young. I feel that, with the homeworking, good or bad, I don't know. There's a lot of people who say it's been great for them. They've really enjoyed it. But I think for the young, perhaps it hasn't been so great. My experience as a young person out and about, that's why I've met my friends, my colleagues, people I get on very well with. I met them all at work. And then there's all the interaction, the banter that you get in the office. And so it must be dreadful when you don't have that and you're at home all the time, you're not getting out, you're not meeting everyone. So I would say, let's all get back to work, because, it's great. It's great for everybody. And I think as an older generation, we're quite selfish. We've got our families, we've got our way of life. It works for us, but it doesn't work for everyone. So let's not forget that.
No, they're saying Generation Z is really, really lonely, and where some of them don't have any friends whatsoever.
Yeah.
And you can see how that would happen, as you rightly said, Margaret. We meet our colleagues. I have some fantastic friends that I've met through work, lifelong friends. What else have you got for us, please?
Well, there was a light-hearted issue on the radio this morning, if I can talk about the radio, and it was about, how are we going to dress when we go back to work? And men were saying that they didn't want to wear ties or suits anymore, wanted to be more casual. Women, there was talk about wearing trainers to work now. And I mean, what do you guys think about that?
Well, it's funny you should say, actually, none of us are wearing a tie. Davies is the only one in a suit. I know that Martin and Nigel, who I know very well as well, they normally wear suits, don't we, guys? Will you go back to wearing a suit when we open up?
I mean, we're on a way what you like to work, have been throughout the whole of COVID. Tend to dress smarter for meetings with clients, but there are not many of those. And I'm not sure people are going to want to return to being that smart.
Yeah.
David?
No, I'd echo that. We don't have a formal dress code, so a lot of my guys will be on site quite regularly. So there's no point wearing a suit on site. And in the office we're very relaxed. So I just happened to be wearing a suit today because it was easy, actually. I didn't have to think too hard about it.
Martin, what about yourself?
In the office, we tend to just wear what we want. I think when I go to the homes, particularly, I would put a suit on and a tie, mainly because we're in quite a traditional sector where we're dealing with older people and their families. So there is a perception that they want to feel a bit more formal when we turn up, that we are. It doesn't mean we're any more professional than anybody else, but if you're dealing with older people and their families, they just want that feel that you're a professional outfit. So I might put a suit on if I go to the home.
It's funny you should say, because I went to see someone the other day and I thought, I'll just go in my shorts and my t-shirt, and I didn't feel right, actually. I felt I was a bit too underdressed, and I won't be doing that again. I'll probably dress up a little bit smarter than I did, but I was just too cash. That's
yeah. I've got shorts on underneath this.
Oh, that's it. Stand up. Oh,
no, I'm joking. I wouldn't inflict that on the office.
Okay, well, I have actually got shorts on. So
too much information, Mark.
Door smoking mirrors here. Nigel, let's talk about the papers, please. So what have you got?
Well, I think I should carry on from your shorts point first. I was doing the Cotswold Relay on Saturday and the elastic went in my shorts. And I actually finished the race last 3 miles actually holding out my shorts because of fear of embarrassment. But anyway, on with the papers. I'll start, if I do a quick trawl through papers. Track and Trace app. Talk about relaxing it. I think it's absolutely essential because at the moment it's pinging all over the place. Apparently the pings have gone up from 219,000 to 356,000 in 1 week. Now, if you think about businesses trying to get on with work, life, that is just crazy. And by way of example, the Gloucester 10K, we have so many people saying, I've got a ping, we can't do the run now. Most of the time, these pings are completely pointless. People have had some sort of minor brushing with something. I've had to isolate when I couldn't know for 4 months who it was I was supposed to have seen. Crazy. So hopefully it's going to be relaxed, and that will be, I think, really helpful, because if we're going to try and get on with the economy, getting back to life, we're going to end up with everybody at home in isolation if we're not careful. So that's really important. Thought I should say something about the Euros. We haven't actually mentioned them yet. What in the Times, what other nations are thinking about us? And actually, it's not pretty. It's not good. Everyone's saying we're playing rubbish football. We're saying we're really lucky. The Scots are saying England dived into final. They think it's fall over. You know, I have to say, I've been on this planet 58 years. We were in a final when I was 3. Can't remember it at all. 55 years on. Come on, I must have my moment of. Must be able to enjoy it at some point. So I think at the moment, yeah, we're not playing great, but right now I don't really care. We win, we can play great football in the future. So I'd love to play better football. And if I've got a bit of time, just want to talk about the Czech Republic in the Times today. Equality. Apparently, and I never knew this, everybody in the Czech Republic, if you're female, you're going to have over after your name. So it's something Handlikova or whatever. They've now decided, a new law's passed, so you don't actually have to use over if you're a female anymore. And it's really controversial because partly that is a way of distinguishing between sort of male and female in the Czech Republic. So there's a lot of debate and controversy over that. So I think that's really interesting. And if you wanted me to fish on something, it's a spot the difference. You might not be able to see this on camera. That's the picture, I think, of an egret, and there's a cartoon of our erstwhile Prime Minister. And you see the hair. I don't know whether you can see it. You see the hair. You see the egret. Spot the difference.
Oh.
Okay, so that's my trawl through the papers today.
Thanks very much there, Nigel. Thanks very much for a very quick whip through. Right, Martin, let's quickly talk about the care home sector. You kind of touched on it earlier. Obviously, you guys have been through the pandemic. Are things starting to get back to normal now? You know, what's actually going on? And, you know, is there a staff shortage? We're hearing about this, all sorts of things going.
Yeah, we've been very fortunate. As you know, we were one of the first homes in the UK to have all our residents and staff vaccinated. We're at about 85% of our staff being vaccinated and over practically 100% of residents. So things are getting better and better all the time. We have got 50 staff that don't want to have the vaccine, and that's going to be part of a challenge if it becomes law. Most of those 50 staff are Eastern European, and it's a cultural thing about having been told that you have to have a vaccine. So that's something we might have to deal with later on in the year. But generally, things are getting better, and occupancy is good. People are realizing that it's really difficult to look after their loved ones, especially with dementia. So we're seeing a big surge on daycare. So things are slowly getting better for us. I just wanted to touch briefly on something Nigel mentioned, and if I can, Mark, talk about your story in Punchline, which is about self-isolating. I absolutely agree with this. You know, we've got practically 380 odd staff who've been double jabbed, and from the schools going back, every week, you know, we're getting 15 or 20 people off, wrapped up in the self-isolation. And there's talk about it being relaxed. That really does need to happen. If you've been double jabbed, or they need to extend the distance, which is something they were talking about in today's paper, I think that's absolutely vital. Otherwise, we're going to go through the next couple of months as lockdown eases with 20 to 30 staff off every week. So I'm hoping that's going to be changed.
Well, it's absolutely critical for the hospitality sector. You know, you could, you know, or the nursing sector. There was something on the news the other day, like 50 or 60, you know, doctors and nurses are off all the time because they're getting pinged all the time. Totally agree with you. You know, we have a shortage of it in the hospitality sector already. They're really desperate. Some of the hotels and restaurants can't open full time because their staff are off, or they just don't have enough staff. I mean, that's the big issue, isn't it? There just aren't enough people. All the we relied on and loved have gone.
Yeah, and that's it. You know, we're under no illusions that a third of our staff come from the EU, and a lot of them are staying in this country. They've built a life and around their family and their children here. But we do rely on a steady stream of people from EU to do some of the jobs that people in the UK don't want to do, and they're very, very important to us. Our staffing levels are good, so we're all right at the moment, but I do worry for the future in the next couple of years on how we're going to fill some of those gaps. Because
let's be honest, the Polish people, the Czech people, they're finding that actually it's very expensive to come over here now.
Yeah, inflation is creeping up. As Nigel mentioned as well, that we're going to have to pay a little bit more this year. We know that. Come October, when our pay is reviewed, we're going to have to push pay up. So it is going to be a bit of a challenging year for the care sector, I think.
Will people pay it? Will people pay the extra amount of money? Or they'll have no choice? They'll
have no choice. You know, we're going to have to push our wages up to keep attracting people and keep them here. Again, it's not so much of an issue for us as a charity. We'll just make a little bit less money. That's not the end of the world. But for the commercial sector and some of the smaller care home groups, they're really going to struggle. What I'm noticing this week alone, we've been offered 4 care homes to acquire in Gloucestershire, where people are just pulling out, and they're saying that they're getting out now before it gets really tricky. So I think there's going to be quite a few care homes coming up for disposal in Gloucestershire over the next couple of months. Okay, thanks ever so much for Martin. Real dire warnings there. David, let's flip over to you, please, sir. We talked about the high street. We talked about before about Gap closing.
Yep.
And we talked about realigning the high street, you know, and the pressures on the market. How's it looking in your particular sector?
Okay, so in construction, yeah, there are certainly pressures brought about by all sorts of different factors. So lack of hauliers, probably still the Suez Canal, probably Brexit, or making something of a perfect storm. So material supplies are in drastically short supply. Steel work, you can't get steel for love nor money. It was on, I think, 18-week delivery, and they actually, the steel manufacturers actually stopped taking orders. Same with plasterboard, same with cement. So it's on the material side, it's a real problem, and obviously all of that is inflationary. You add into that lack of resource, and again, construction industry is one that has been, supported by, European workers, and as we've discussed, around the table this morning, many are not coming or going home. So, all of that is having a significant effect. We're seeing tender prices rise, and my QS colleagues are saying we'll probably see a 7% rise in tender prices this year. That's, I think, the pandemic has added to that. A lot of small builders have been extraordinarily busy in extending and doing works on individual homes, but obviously that soaks up resource as well, which impacts on the bigger developer, on the bigger contractors. Bigger contractors are business people, so they try and buy everything in advance, but then that soaks up all of the available resource for the smaller guys. So it is really tricky.
Do you think there's going to be a knock-on effect that during the pandemic, some of the bigger construction companies and some of the construction companies actually bought in work? We've all been guilty of it, where we've accepted work, we've kind of done it on a cheaper deal in order to win the work because we wanted to keep our staff busy, keep the cash coming into the company. And then what's going to happen, all these material costs, labor costs, all these costs are suddenly going to pile up, and they can't actually put up the estimate. They can't put up. So can you see that coming down the line?
I can, and wherever we've had significant tender price inflation previously, it has put significant strain on contractors, because they will have priced a job sometimes 12 months ago, and will be required in most instances to stick by that price, and absorb higher resource, higher material costs. So yeah, very, very much so. It's not a it's a busy industry, so and people don't have anywhere to go actually. So, but that does lead to disputes and quite a lot of problems in the marketplace.
Now, Evans Jones in particular, I know you guys very, very well, and you have done very well during the pandemic. You recruited as well, rebranded. Yep. Congratulations. What sort of work are you picking up? Is there a particular sector?
Developers haven't really missed a beat during the recession. I think very, very early days, there was probably a month or so where nobody really knew what was happening. Everything then settled down, and has progressed very much as it did in pre-pandemic period, the pre-pandemic period. That there's some sector-specific areas where end users have struggled a little more. We act for a hotelier, so project managing hotels across the country. We think that will, we're still seeing through hotels that we've had on for a while, but I think we will see that stop, and probably a moratorium on new sites coming forward for 12 or 18 months until that market settles down. I think it will come back. I think there's a lot of pent demand for hotels. So, once we are unlocked, it will, they will gain confidence and start building again. But certainly, there are some short-term, pain points for certain sectors. Yeah.
Okay, thanks ever so much, David. I'm going to go over to you there, Margaret. Obviously, you wear a HR hat. Goodness, you must be extremely busy as well. So many different areas of employment law. The workers thinking they've got more rights than they actually do. Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Well, we've had lots of queries with regard to people returning to work from home working. Employers are thinking ahead, and we're at a point now where we've got to think about getting people back into the workplace, but they're sort of facing a lot of resistance. Staff want to continue working from home, and of course they have done this. They know it works. So why should they have to go back into the office? And so it has been very difficult trying to explain to employees that it was never meant to be permanent. Working from home was a result of the pandemic, and so it was always a solution to the problem at the time. Nobody said it was going to be permanent. So we're looking at trying to get them back to work, and they feel that they have a right to the choice of whether they go back or not, which is fine, but it's really a case now of what's best for the business, what's best for the employee, and reaching a compromise. But a lot of companies have decided that policy-wise, to get people back to work in the best way that they can. And so, you know, everyone, my advice to everyone is to adopt a softly approach, but obviously you have to look at the overall picture and try and be fair to everyone. You cannot, it's so difficult because you can't single one person out, because then everyone will turn around and say, well, that's not fair. So it's got to be done in the fair and reasonable manner, really, for all staff concerned.
Margaret, are most of the big companies that you're talking to, are they looking to bring everybody back now? Or the majority of people back?
I have an example of a large company where they've decided, and it's the right decision, to write to everybody now, tell them that the pandemic was on a temporary basis and they're looking for the future. For now, nothing changes, but it could be in the future that they will request that people return to work. And when that does happen, then the expectation is that they do. And perhaps that's the best way to handle it, rather than wait until the time comes where we say, right, everybody back. Maybe start writing to your staff in advance and let them know what your plans are.
Have you been surprised how many people are actually willing to change jobs? I mean, that's one of the things that struck me, how during the pandemic, people were swapping over jobs. And I mean, personally, that's the last thing on earth on the top of my mind. I'll just hunker down, pull down the hatches, maybe because I'm old school, pull down the hatches, wait for it to blow through, save as much money as we possibly could. And then you've got the younger kind of generation, they go, way, I'm off, I've had enough.
There's two sides of the coin, isn't it? And when you're older, you look for safety, security. When you're young, you know, you go where who pay the highest salary. You have different priorities, and different things matter. The recruitment market at the moment is dreadful. It's just really, really, really hard to find decent people, and for that reason, on the one side, people are staying put. It's too uncertain to move. So they're staying where they are. They're not interested in chasing the big salaries on offer. They just want security. And then on the other hand, the hospitality industry, we have an issue there whereby staff are still on furlough. So they don't really, what's the point of coming back when they're being paid to stay at home? So we have that mentality as well in the hospitality sector. But to be fair, I think give it a few months, it will even out. We cannot sustain this. So it will, something will happen to burst the bubble. And I think we will possibly go back to a little bit of normality.
Maybe when the furlough scheme starts, and companies have to pay the 70% and this, goes down to 60%, and the final thing, they'll either have to let them go or bring them back. Exactly. You can't have people sitting at home with 60% of their salary, or government only paying 6%. No, thanks ever so much for that, Margaret. Nigel, are you finding the same thing? Recruitment, finding the right people? Is that how you're finding it?
I think resources is a big thing at the moment. We've heard what's happening in the construction sector. I mean, that's the people that I work with are saying the same. It's really very difficult to get things, materials. They can't build houses, so they can't then actually complete the sales on new build. So that's the problem. But it's very much, obviously my main sector is employment as well as Margaret's, and here it's the resource is the problem, because there aren't enough people around, bizarrely, to actually do the jobs, and therefore recruitment is really difficult. There's wage inflation, which is a problem for employers, because a lot of employers have really suffered over the last year, 18 months, and suddenly, in order to retain the staff or get new staff, they're going to have to pay lots more money, which drives inflation, and I think will cause a problem with profitability, with businesses having a debt already. So I think there's a problem coming down the line, because I think it's all a bit out of sequence. And of course, employees are actually having to work probably quite hard right now. So they're thinking, well, I'm a scarce resource. I'm entitled to more money. I'm having to work hard. I want more money. But ultimately, we've got to get the balance right. And I think there's a problem with resource. We haven't got enough resource. I think in some sectors, Brexit is a problem because, as we've heard, a lot of people who might have come from Eastern Europe have now gone back. And it's all right saying, well, we can be flexible, but trying to actually move people between sectors actually takes time. I think there's a real market for getting apprentices going, and actually people getting skills on the job. Again, that'll take time to come through. But I think the past drive to drive everyone to universities, in retrospect, I think is not right. I think we need more people to actually get the skills. They can earn a lot of money by getting actual trades and actually doing the resource, getting the resource we actually need as a country. So I think there's quite a few challenges coming, and we probably haven't seen them all yet. That's maybe a bit pessimistic. Right now, I think businesses generally are doing quite nicely, but it's actually resourcing that's the problem.
I think a lot of us as well are here sort of top of the tree running the companies. Everybody I talk to, we're all knackered. You know, it's been 16 months of no holidays, just working over the hours, worried about our staff, worried about our families, worried about the business, worried about everything. At the same time, trying to keep the wheels turning and keep the money coming in. And, you know, it's a kind of burnout phase. So if we're not careful in, you know, another 4 or 5 months carrying on doing this, we're all going to be absolutely buggered, you know, as tired. Really is. Nigel, so have you picked out a story from Punchline?
Well, I was actually going to go with the restaurant on the docks story. As much because, I mean, as you know, we've just run the 10K, and because we didn't run it last year because of COVID, the change around the docks, quays and the canal is actually incredible with all the development around there. And I think it's a really good news story, because an awful lot of feedback from those who did the race was, wow, I didn't know Gloucester was so beautiful. We had so much great stuff, and we have people coming from different places think, wow, I didn't know this. And to actually see the boats and the docks and all that good news about what we can do, and that's almost like a fulcrum, a centre for Gloucester, and people coming into the area. I just think it's so positive.
No, thanks very much. I totally agree, because obviously my office is down there, and they're doing the new health centre. They've revisited the prison, which is obviously a bit that by the back of me, Hartbury College, put the new student accommodation there as well. So they have more students, of course, all the forums taking place, and we've got Debenhams. It's pretty exciting. You know, I think you've got to look at a glass half full if we can for Gloucester. I really do. Margaret, I'm going to go back to you. Thanks ever so much for that, Nigel. Margaret, what have you picked out for us in Punchline this week? What's caught your eye?
Oh, I like the floating restaurant. And that sounds fantastic. In Gloucester Quays, is this a planning proposal? Is it going to happen, or because it's such a beautiful area, the docks? They've done so well, Gloucester, with it, and you know, I just think it would be great for the area. It's just sort of bring more people in.
No, I think it's a fantastic area, and of course, another independent restaurant in Gloucester, absolutely brilliant. David, what about yourself, sir? What have you picked out for Punchline?
Mine's a slightly more negative story. It's about customers getting fed up with COVID-19 situation being used as an excuse for poor service delivery. And, you know, boy, have I seen that. I deal with local authorities on a daily basis. And, you know, right through COVID, that's all I got. We can't deal with this because of COVID. We can't go and look at a site because of COVID. Well, what is stopping somebody getting in their car, going to look at a site? They don't even have to get out. And, you know, it put a lot of pressure on certainly the private sector, you know, with planning particularly. We had to supply, you know, a whole, you know, range of photographs of sites because the officers just weren't willing to go out.
Well, they're going to get paid anyway, aren't they, Dave?
Yeah. And it's there is no excuse. And it, you know, I know local authorities are under-resourced, but, you know, say that rather than use COVID as a cloak to hide behind. So interesting article, and certainly something that I've experienced right through the pandemic.
No, thanks very much for that. Martin, what's caught your eye in this week's Punch, please?
I think another story that I picked up was the luxury cinema opening up in Cheltenham, or the Tivoli. And it's really good to see, because if you walk, this is really David's area, but if you walk through Cheltenham, there is a huge amount of retail space available. And you look at it and you think, who is going to fill all these spaces? And there was talk about relaxation of some of the planning rules so that they could be turned into accommodation easier or other uses quicker. And I think if we're going to fill some of the spaces in Cheltenham High Street, particularly along the Prom, then Cheltenham Borough Council have got to do something to fill those stores, because there are many stores there that have been empty, I think, probably pre-pandemic, and they just can't rent them. So I'd like to see some action from Cheltenham Borough Council and the planning team, or how they're going to look at the rateable value of these properties. Otherwise, they'll stay empty for an awful long time.
The big problem I was talking to actually is that a lot of the time the council don't know who own these properties. They're not actually in control of the rates, and the rents are absolutely astronomical, just massively overpriced. Well, thanks ever so much. I'm just going to quickly run through a couple that have caught my own eye, if that's okay. We've got the new Cyber and Engineering Centre opening in Gloucestershire College. I think that's really, really exciting. I want to say a big shout out to Elmrep, who during the pandemic, bearing in mind the guy sells photocopiers, has actually managed to increase his business. So if I was wearing a hat, I would take it off. We're also Brunsdon's, they've increased business as well. They've moved to a bigger office. Big shout out to Neville Mills. Blue Sky Signage, another company, David Althor. Well done, Dave. He's expanded his business. Pied Piper, got a shout out to those guys. £12,000 raised at the charity golf day recently. Grayling's Engineering's £200,000 investment in a new machinery in the Forest of Dean. Great news there. And Cheltenham Bid getting a second term. Fantastic. Those guys worked really, really hard for that. So anyway, I'd just like to thank my excellent team today. Thanks ever so much for joining Punchline Talks. See you next week. Bye.